Oh my god, who are you?
Oh, hey, everybody, you're back! Welcome back to Super Festival. Once again, I am your host, Jordan Sparks, the Director of Technology here at the Hand-Eye Society, and I'm here to show you some Super Festival goodness with our amazing talks and events. We've got a great show for you tonight, but before that, be sure that you're getting the full Super Festival experience as much as you can, because you can check out at least some of our 4-part hybrid Super Festival event no matter where you are in the world. First, we have the Super Festival website, which you can access at bit.ly/HES-Superfest. Here you can find out all about this week-long event, the 30-plus games being featured, all the upcoming talks, and more. Definitely go check that out and discover more games. The second part is, of course, the Twitch show that you are watching, which will be every day from 6 to 9 p.m. Toronto time, aside from Sunday, which will be 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Follow us to find out when we go live, and also check out the Super Festival website for more details on the schedule. The third part is the return of our legendary Torontron arcade machines. If you're in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can visit several venues in the city throughout the week to play some of the Super Festival featured games on location. Finally, there's the return of our famous Hand-Eye Society Ball, our fancy party for the Toronto game dev community, happening this Saturday, November 30th at 6 p.m. in Toronto. It's sure to be a fun time, but don't wait. Tickets are limited, and as of now, they're almost sold out. If you're in Toronto, be sure to grab a ticket and join us there. This is our 3rd annual Super Festival, and it is once again stacked with amazing talent. However, we wouldn't have been able to do it without all of our amazing sponsors. So thank you to Ontario Creates, the City of Toronto, the Province of Ontario, the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Canada Council for the Arts, as well as our studio sponsors Clever Endeavor and Stella Maris. Thank you so much for your support. Well, that's it from me. I'll be back later, but for now, let's get our game on and enjoy today's talks and games. Happy Super Festival, everyone!
Believe me, go straight till the morning, no lie, we won't wait. And we're taking everything we want and we can do it all straight. We ain't stopping, believe me, go straight till the morning, no lie, we won't wait. And we're taking everything we want and we can do it all straight. No sweat, all straight.
Inside every creator lies a guiding star, a unique vision waiting to illuminate the world. At Stella Maris, we're not just a partner, we're your compass. With tailored mentorship, essential tools, and unwavering support, we nurture your brilliance. Discover your path, unleash your creativity, and let your star shine brightly.
new family. Adventure beyond the safety of your home and confront what lies in waiting. Defend your flock from the perils of this world, but don't be late. For dinner, forage, fish, and farm to stock your pantry. Improve your home and tend to your flock, but look out for Shub. He takes quick to a love potion. Guide your flock through this world, for you are not alone. You shall... Hush, please, I'm doing something. You shall... What do you want? Oh, you want to say it together? Well, all right. You shall not pause.
creator lies a guiding star, a unique vision waiting to illuminate the world. At Stella Maris, we're not just a partner, we're your compass. With tailored mentorship, essential tools, and unwavering support, we nurture your brilliance. Discover your path, unleash your creativity, and let your star shine brightly.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to my talk about what I learned from playing licensed games for a year at a Hand-Eye Society Super Festival. I'm going to start us off with a little bit of background, and then we'll get into some of those lessons. Who am I? Hi, I'm Devon. I'm a solo game developer. I have about 9 years of game development experience in the industry. About 5 of those years are also developing titles under the label of Devs Games. I work at a few different places in the AAA and indie space, so I've kind of run the gamut between big studio and small studio. I have a BA in game design. In my free time, I also make art. Here's some stuff that I've worked on as a developer. You can see there's some smaller indie titles there. The bottom 3 are actually ones that I've solo developed. And so I've kind of, done a fair amount of stuff in a wide variety of different roles in the industry. And a lot of that work has been making my own stuff and self-publishing and self-funding and all that fun junk. So I make a lot of my own games and draw inspiration from a lot of different sources. And some background on licensed games. So what do I mean when I say licensed games? So typically I mean interactive media that kind of is from something that is outside of interactive media or kind of endorsed or tied into. So IPs or property that aren't usually video games being brought into games and being, essentially gamified. Typically in previous generations, which is what I'm focusing on here, a lot of the focus is usually on actually building up entire games from the ground up to make licensed games out of them completely. Nowadays, a lot of licensed stuff we see is a lot more focused on just sort of brand integrations, or I guess activations as they're called. So tying in, a property from a different franchise into your game in like a small event or something of the sort. So an example is Peter Griffin outfit in Fortnite, where they didn't make a whole Peter Griffin game. They just kind of put Peter Griffin in Fortnite and said, yeah, that's good enough. That's enough to get people interested, whereas they used to just make entire Family Guy games just for the purpose of activating an audience. And what's Licensed Game Monday? When I talk about Licensed Game Monday, it's my own sort of creation. So every Monday I'll play old licensed video games and just kind of ruminate on them and talk about them and check them out, because there's a lot of them that, even when I was younger, I never really checked out. So it was a good opportunity to sort of see some of that stuff for myself. I've been doing it for 1.5 years so far. I have about 63 games and counting. I think that's lowballing it though. The number's probably closer to 70. I haven't been keeping super accurate track, but it's about that. And if this sounds interesting to you to check out licensed games, feel free to follow me on Twitch, Slaughter and Echo, and maybe you'll catch a stream where I'm playing a licensed game on a Monday. And here's a little example of what you might see from me on my stream. I'm a gamer. No fair, he's wall hacking. I'm stun locked. Dude. I can't move. I literally can't do... So that's kind of what you can expect from me playing some of the licensed games. They're quite an adventure. A lot of surprises in there. And typically when we talk about licensed games, people tend to mostly remember the really bad ones. They get I think online especially, like a bad rap of, going viral for being low quality, being like, how did this game get made? Things like that. They get criticized for being rushed, for being shovelware. And, people like the Angry Video Game Nerd have kind of like created entire brands around the idea of hating on licensed games to some degree, especially because they used to be more prominent. But we also forget that there were a lot of good licensed games too. Like they like any other video game or any other piece of art, they really run a spectrum. There's a lot of properties out there that are based on existing licenses that are actually really good. I mean, GoldenEye like set a standard for first-person shooters that I think everybody kind of even forgets that sometimes that it's a James Bond game. It's tied to a book and movie series. So there's a lot of potential out there for them to be good if they, have the resources to make them good, which is why I think they're so interesting. Like there's so many of them out there, right? Like I went through and did a ranking of all the ones that I had played this last year or so, and you can see they're not all terrible. There's actually a lot of pretty decent ones that I mean, maybe wouldn't be recommending them for all my friends to go play, but like I had a pretty fun time with them. And a lot of them, I think, too, are really interesting artifacts of our industry from kind of a different time. And I want to kind of touch on that a little bit too as we get into these lessons. So let's get into the lessons that that licensed games have taught me as I've played them, and the things that I've kind of want to pull from them and start attributing into my own work in more creative ways. So Lesson one. Licensed games are pretty resourceful. A lot of the time, licensed games are made under pretty strict IP requirements. You know, you have a whole property that you want represented in a good and accurate way, so you're kind of working under constraints there. They're made by small teams. So a lot of the time, they're kind of forced to kind of copy, take mechanics, innovate, and expand on games made previously by other studios. And I think in some ways they give off a pretty indie spirit, where if you play indie games made by small teams, they do a lot of innovating, but they'll also be kind of just taking things from genre and taking things from other games and kind of figuring it out as they go. There's a lot of sense of that when you play licensed games. It feels like a lot of teams kind of figuring out how they're going to do this as they go along. They haven't really figured any of it out, and it's kind of fun in that sort of way. So they're kind of figuring out ways to efficiently get these games out. Kind of like Elmo's Letter Adventure and Elmo's Number Journey. So they actually have the same same mini game in both of these games, but they're completely different games. And they kind of just change up like letters and numbers. It's kind of the same thing. And what I think is interesting is like for their audience, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, I don't think the 4-year-old who's playing Elmo's Letter Adventure is going to be like, they took the same game. Like, no, they know it's a corner they could afford to cut. They knew that they could add this in both games and it would be fine, and like make a variation of it, and the audience won't really mind. And I think that's interesting that they were willing to have that take that concession with what they were making in order to just kind of, make another thing out of it. I think that's admirable in a way, almost. Monster House for the PS2 and I think GameCube as well is another interesting example of this, where the whole game is kind of like a Resident Evil like surprise. It makes sense, right? Because it's basically Resident Evil for kids, where you're stuck in a house and it's a lot of spooky stuff happens, like a Resident Evil. But in the game, you have multiple characters and you play through basically each of their own individual experiences exploring this house. And as you explore the house, you go through the same room different times as different characters from different approaches. So they'll reuse the same floor layouts and the same areas within the house, but they'll add like different gameplay elements to it, have a different twist on each one. So they really take kind of the base environment they've built and they just reuse it and reimagine it and reinterpret it different ways as they go through. And I thought it was a pretty interesting use because it works for the IP, where, you're in one house, you're not going anywhere else. But also it allows them to kind of expand what they're going to do with it and reimagine how the player goes through it. Lesson number 2. Licensed games are ubiquitous and they try to make themselves ubiquitous. Obviously, licensed games and their developers want them to sell really well so that they can keep a job and stay employed. Many licensed games try to meet the player where they're at and kind of embrace the capabilities of the platforms that they're on. And a lot of them are ported pretty widely and have multiple versions and different designs, so players can kind of engage with them no matter what and no matter the audience. And I think that's pretty commendable, and it's pretty interesting because I feel like sometimes you don't always see that in games. And it's interesting with licensed games, especially that some instances they really try to get these games everywhere they can. So an example of that would be SpongeBob SquarePants Lights Camera Action. So on console, it was on the bottom left there. You can see it's like I I think it's kind of more like a Mario Party kind of thing with a lot of mini games for multiple players. Oh, lights, camera, pants. Sorry, excuse me. SpongeBob SquarePants lights, camera, pants. In the top and the middle, you can see with the Game Boy, they couldn't make it a 4-player party game because it's on the Game Boy, so they simply made it a platformer, like a lot of Game Boy games that have been successful in there, because they know a lot of platformers exist and they know a lot of people in Game Boy will play platformers. And same with the bottom right. When it got ported over to PC, they decided to make it into a point-and-click adventure game because that makes more sense for it being on PC. Obviously, this is expensive, and obviously, this is not realistic to expect anybody to be able to do that constantly. But I think it's interesting how they go to great lengths to try to adapt to the different platforms that they're on and meet the audience with kind of relative expectations for those platforms. Another thing too, and I think this is one that tends to get overlooked a lot in my opinion, is that like licensed games are artistic, even though they feel like they might not be. They might feel a little bit soulless because they're tied to a brand. They might feel a little corporate because of that, but a lot of them do have highly creative components that their team has worked hard on. They exhibit the creative side of the developers, people who are bound by business but still want to push their boundaries and still want to exercise that creative muscle and really push the boundaries of what they want to do. And I found, like, just personally as a developer playing it, very few of the games felt phoned in. There's rare examples where I was like, okay, they maybe could have done better on this, but most of the time, like, they usually have redeemable factors or mechanics in them that are really kind of interesting in their own merit, or kind of do their own things that you wouldn't expect. One example of this too is like Duck Dynasty for the 3DS. I know you're thinking there's a Duck Dynasty game on the 3DS. Remember how big Duck Dynasty was? Well, yeah, they made games for it. I played the one on PS3. I haven't actually played this one, but I think just looking at it, I'm sure someone in the audience is going, that's kind of interesting, right? They clearly, they know the 3DS is where the Animal Crossing folk and the Nintendo folk are. So they're not going to make like a game that is about horribly, brutally, like killing and skinning ducks or whatever. No, it's kind of like they went out of their way to be very creative with it, very artistic with it. And they kind of emulated what they saw in Animal Crossing and games like that, and kind of added their own spin to it. I actually really like the way that this game looks. I think it's a interesting like stylization. I think what they did with some of the character work is very cool. Like it's very interesting in its own merit. You can tell that an art team and game developers put their time and effort into really putting a creative twist on this thing that, if you're told to make a Duck Dynasty game, some people might very well just try to phone it in, but like they didn't. They still wanted to make a game that they were invested in, so they did what they could to kind of meet that where it was. I thought that was kind of cool. Vin Diesel's The Wheelman, which is like an open world kind of Grand Theft Auto-esque game from the PS2 era. It was actually interesting because in its credits they have these very long kind of nods to all the buildings in the world. I didn't notice many buildings in the world because I was driving around, but a lot of nod of like history and like talking about some of the buildings and like where they are. And this was like just like in the credit sequence of the game. And I thought I thought that was something that doesn't feel like you would include in your game unless, I mean, who knows, maybe legally for some reason they had to, but I do think that it kind of speaks to wanting to be true to the place that you're taking inspiration from, and wanting to be like showing that inspiration of, hey, we built these buildings that were actually from, I believe it takes place in Spain, that were actually in Spain, and like we're trying to pay them homage. And even in games that I've worked on where you're directly taking from real world inspiration, that doesn't always happen, right? So I think this is the kind of thing that only comes about is if the people that are working on this game really kind of put themselves into it and really wanted to really acknowledge the artistic merit to the work that they were doing, Another interesting example is, I don't know if anybody's heard of Darkened Sky. you wouldn't know it from looking. And there's only one thing from all these screenshots that actually even would show you that this is a licensed game. There's a Skittle down here on the bottom corner. This is a Skittles game. It is a Skittles RPG game, where you play as a character who is basically trying to save a fantasy world, and the Skittles provide her with magic. And this game, I'm still in the process of playing through it, but I really do think that it's another example of licensed games being very artistic and wanting to kind of show that creative craft through the work that they're doing. They built like a whole RPG. The Skittles are such a minor part. This is like an RPG first and a licensed game second. And I think it's just sort of speaks again to that element of people wanting to put themselves into these games, people wanting to build the games that they want to build while still being under the constraints of licensed properties and media franchises. It shows that underneath it all, there were people who were, trying to do their own thing. Check out Darkened Sky. It's not the worst. There's definitely some painful elements, but it's just so captivating as a licensed property. Another example too, here in Xena Warrior Princess, speaking to this sort of artistic element, there's a mechanic where you basically have like her chakram that you can throw and like steer in the air. And you've seen this kind of mechanic in other games, but I feel like this is one of the more early examples I could feel like of this being done in this sort of like action combat-y sort of fashion. And it feels really good. And it's obviously the kind of thing like they could have just done it where you lock onto a target and press a button to throw it, but they really wanted to like invest in this and really build a mechanic out of this. And I think that just kind of shows that they really put themselves into it. They really wanted that mechanic to shine, and they really wanted to invest more work into it than they probably needed to do. Lesson number 4, licensed games are brave. As I kind of talked about, they take creative risks, sometimes despite themselves. They don't always succeed at their goal. They're maybe not always good, but it always kind of feels like they're made by people who at least gave it their best shot and put something out there, even despite it being maybe not up to snuff. So Charlotte's Web is an example where it's not really an amazing game. A lot of the objectives are you get put in a level. There are some enemies that might run at you and touch you and reset you back to the start. And you kind of just have to run around collecting things with some mini games in between. It's not amazing. It's like, it's interesting in its own way, but I wouldn't necessarily like say anybody needs to go play it. But I think it takes some level of bravery, right, to commit yourself to that and to ship something like this. Like, even if your game is not entirely successful, it's still a daunting task to ship a game at all. Like, whether or not this game is good, this game is a game that is out and you can play, right? Which I think is probably more than some people can say for most games. It's hard to get a game out, and even if it's not perfect, it's better that it's released than not out at all. So Babe is another example of this. This one's actually kind of fun, where this was I want to say it was a Game Boy Advance game or a Game Boy Color game that they ported to the PlayStation 2, I think a few years after the fact. I don't know what the story was behind this, but they ported it a few years after the fact, but they also changed all the levels. So the level design is a little shoddy. I couldn't get past the first level in this game, and when I looked at the Game Boy Advance game, it seemed like it was quite a bit better. So I don't know what the story was behind that, but another example, right, of like you're kind of making a game that is hodgepodge from a different game that you've kind of reimagined and reinterpreted in different ways that maybe is not the strongest example of its genre, but it's commendable that this game came out at all, because again, that's a lot more than some games can say. Some games don't even make it out, and for better or for worse, they made a Babe game, and they can say that they made a Babe game, and I think that's admirable. Another thing too, this is something that I find myself thinking about a lot as a game developer who is going back to a lot of these licensed titles, is that they're, regardless of whether or not they feel like, corporate-y to someone, or that they're like a phoning it in, they're still from our video game industry. And we tend to, I feel like we tend to maybe not ignore them, but underplay them as part of our collective consciousness. Where some licensed games feel like, as I mentioned before, kind of feel like indie teams, feel like people who are just starting out, figuring it out for the first time, figuring out how to make a game and what the best way to make this type of game is. And a lot of them are still kind of made under the same really difficult conditions that our industry currently faces. And in a time where arguably a lot of those pressures were worse. I want to walk you through a little story that I found from an article on GameDeveloper.com written by John Lee, one of the producers on The Italian Job for the PlayStation 1. I'm going to read the whole thing because I think it's good to actually hear out loud. So this is about shipping the game. During the final stages, just 2 weeks before submitting the Gold Master, Robin, one of our programmers, had been working over the weekend tying up some loose ends. Some delinquent joyriders were screeching around a corner so fast they had veered into the opposite side of the road, resulting in a head-on collision with Rob. The rest of the team found out about the accident on the following Monday morning. Rob was in the hospital, strapped down so he couldn't move. He could have seriously damaged his spinal column, and the fear of Rob being paralyzed was in the air. Luckily, after a few days, he soon started to recover and was sent home to rest. We sent him cards and joked about ideas of how we considered transporting his PC from the office to the hospital. The game still had to be finished, so after a few phone conversations, we sent the PC to his house in case he got bored, and he painfully continued to finish coding his part of the game from his bed. This delayed the completion of the game by 2 weeks. Rob has now fully recovered. He only twitches now and again. Now, I think that's kind of a heartbreaking story in a number of ways. I've actually gone through and sort of bolded the things that I think are maybe the worst about this story and how it kind of speaks to the state of the industry at the time, right? Like somebody had to work after almost being paralyzed from their bed to ship an Italian Job game. People really put everything that they had into these games sometimes. I think it shows creatively, but I also think that even if it doesn't necessarily show in the game itself, people were still working in very debilitating industry conditions to try to ship some of these games. And even if they're not good, I think they're worthy of respect just by virtue of being part of that history and being part of where some of these people started off and what they had to kind of go through, right? They're kind of artifacts in that sort of way. I think I'm, obviously glad this person recovered. I believe they're still working in industry and still, doing their thing. So that's great for them. But it is like, this is one of those stories that I feel like you could still hear from our industry now and then. Some of these things, some of these examples of, oh, we joked about how we could get them more work. It's like, that's something that I could imagine an actual game studio doing. I could imagine people trying to find ways to pressure other people into doing a little bit more work, even if they're not up for it. So I think the industry, while it has changed, has not changed arguably enough. And I think these are just interesting as artifacts, right? These licensed games as artifacts of sort of where the industry was and how we've maybe changed or not changed since then. And licensed games are also made by people. I think that's a really important thing. They're still creative works. They're still made by people. Kind of as I was talking about, they might be corporate, they might be janky, they might be terrible, but they're still the product of somebody's hard spent labor. And I think they still continue to warrant being valued for that alone. At the end of a Lemony Snicket's a series of unfortunate events, the development team has a bunch of like little thank you notes that obviously they have written, and it was a very nice, touching moment to get to the end of the game and see a bunch of personal notes from developers. And this is something I also haven't seen in many modern games nowadays. Just end credit sequences where developers are personally, speaking to their hardships or speaking to their loved ones or speaking to the things that they valued about the production. So it's people thanking their loved ones, people thanking other people for delivering pizzas, people who are talking about their pets, things like that. It's a very humanizing moment, and it reminds you that at the end of the day, this series of unfortunate events, Lemony Snicket game, was made by a team of people who really put themselves into it. And I think that's nice. And that's a humanizing thing. And I feel like if video games need anything, sometimes they need to be a little more humanized. So that's all the lessons and the really high level stuff that I've kind of been taking from some of these licensed games. Let's go over what we just looked at. I kind of admire them as both artifacts of our industry and the state of it and works of art. I want to emulate their spirit in my own works, in my own game development projects, by matching their resourcefulness. So I think I can kind of match that by scoping down my game, finding some easy wins, kind of cutting corners where I can to ensure that what I make gets finished, and also that I reuse resources wherever I can to make my job easier. I want my own games to be ubiquitous. I want to work towards granting people easier access to my work so there's more ways to engage with them. That can come in as things like accessibility options, more versatility with porting, better optimization so low spec machines can run them, so people from maybe different parts of the world who don't have my beefy computer can also manage to play them. Ubiquity is a good thing in that way. I want my games to be artistic. I want to try to inject passion in all my work, even when it's challenging, even if it's something that I don't think I'm necessarily passionate about. I want to find something that I can be passionate about and inject my passion into that so that it can sort of shine through, even if it's something that might be a little soulless. I want my works to be brave. I want to ship a thing, even if it doesn't feel like it's necessarily ready to be shipped. I want it to be out there instead of just kind of hidden away and leaving me feeling ashamed of it. I want it to be shown to the world, and kind of mimic that bravery. I want it to be considerate of our industry. I want my works to push for challenging our working conditions, values, and assumptions about how our industry should work or how we think it should work. And I also don't ever want to push myself beyond reasonable limits for the sake of labor. I do not want to end up working in a hospital bed. If I can avoid it, I would like to avoid it. And at the end of the day, I want my games to be human. I want them to be considerate of others. I want people to know that they're made by humans and not made by, a team of people who doesn't have a face or doesn't have thoughts or feelings. And I want my games to be imperfect because I think that's a good thing. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the licensed game story, isn't it? Like games that are maybe a little bit imperfect, maybe a little bit strange, but are still finished and still important artifacts. So these are the lessons we went over. I want to thank you very much for coming to my talk and paying attention and listening for me talking about licensed games and all the weird, interesting uniqueness they have to offer. You can check me out on Blue Sky, Tumblr, LinkedIn, wherever you feel like. But yeah, thank you very much for coming out to listen to me talk about the lessons I learned from licensed games. And I hope you enjoy the rest of Super Festival. Bye-bye.
Sage's skin breaks out with beads of sweat. They trail down her hairline. Her body tells her to be on high alert. Sage feels like a presence is eyeing her. Yet when she turns to look around, there's not another person in sight.
Oh my fucking god!
A trash can had fallen down.
Oh, calm down, Sage. It's nothing.
As Sage turns to the left, she glances at the prone form of what is actually a person. Before she can get a good look, something blurs past her and latches onto her right hand with a sickening crunch. Naomi injects Sage with the serum. A few seconds pass and nothing happens until...
Fuck! It burns! It burns, Naomi!
Fuck, what? What is happening? Naomi and Sage watch in horror as the creature eats away at what's left of Sage's hand and starts moving up her arm. Sage's flesh ripples and drops to the floor.
on a path in the woods. And at the end of that path is a cabin. And in the basement of that cabin is a princess. You're here to slay her.
Wait, what?
If you don't, it will be the end of the world.
Now hold on a second. Don't you listen to him. What did I ever do to you?
She will do everything in her power to stop you.
Well, yeah. I don't want to die.
She'll charm and she'll lie and she'll promise you the world, and if she has the chance, she will kill you 12 times over.
Is he even listening to me?
Don't forget, the fate of the world rests on your shoulders.
You're not actually going to try and slay me or anything, right? Because I wouldn't if I were you.
If you try, I'll kill you as many times as it takes.
Let's just go for a mullet. You know, and that looks great, honestly. Good job. You look great. Next. Okay, we got some of these. What the hell does this do? Oh, okay, curls it. Oh, that's great. We got one of these guys. That just kind of blows it around, I guess. All right. Oh, goodbye. What am I supposed to do with this? Okay, we're gonna have to probably just clean some of this up. Honestly, not sure if we're gonna get that fixed. Probably best to just cut off a bunch of it, I think. Oh god, the hair's getting everywhere. It's all over my shop. Ugh. Okay, well, let's shave you kind of just on one side and, yeah, just everywhere. Okay, get out of here. Really gotta figure out how to turn these off. Ultra clutch hair cement. Okay, here you are. Let's curl left side, colors. Good enough. Next! What's it gonna be this time? You have too much hair. We can...
Wait, you know what I want to do?
What? What do you think it would be about?
If they made our lives a movie, it would be boring.
刺火武汉火车票一张。
我要去武汉，我他妈也得先把你拽了。武汉只让进不让出，现在。武汉不是
不进也不能进了，你们俩再往这边出。辣呢？辣呢？
Hello, how are you? Hey, it's you. I'm saying hi to you. Can you see me? I'm over here, on the left side of the screen. Oh, you want to interview me? Okay. Well, my daily job is just waiting here. Boring? Maybe a little bit. Oh, what, my dream? To go to Coney Island. I wanted to go to the beach, enjoy my vacation life. I've always wanted to know what swimming feels like. It must be different from getting drenched in the rain, right? But I know I can never get there. I'm just a trash can. I think I might spend my whole life here on 363 Lafayette Street. Huh? Is this a balloon? How did you know that yellow is my favorite color? Thank you. Hey, come back. Wait, I'm not done yet. Wait, come back. Wait a second. I feel something different. I feel like my body's getting lighter. Wait, am I finally going to Coney Island?
everybody. Guess who's back? Back again. Sparky's back. Tell a friend. Welcome back to the Hand-Eye Society Super Festival. We are actually live right now. I am talking to you. I can see you all in chat. And I hope everybody is doing all right. Now, we have our next guest, which is going to be a live talk between three talented individuals. Everyone loves a good laugh, whether it's with friends, at a comedy club, watching a movie, or playing our favorite games. Our next live talk focuses on three game developers discussing what they learned about comedy and narrative games while writing The Little Guardsman. Give a warm and hilarious Hand-Eye Society welcome to Scott Christian, Matt Bernard, and Jeremy Lapalme. Take it away, everyone.
Howdy, everybody. Hello. Thank you for having us. It's such a cool thing to be part of this festival this year. I can't speak for these knuckleheads, but Hand-Eye Society has been on my radar for probably 10 years when I was an undergrad dreaming of being a composer for games. So this is very cool. We are a part of the small but mighty team for Little Guardsman, which is we're primarily based in Toronto. Our team is global. Our game released in January, and through this talk, you're going to learn about our game and learn about how comedy is the DNA of our game. You want to frame it, or shall we just jump in?
No, I think just jump in. I think that's a fantastic summary of what we're here to do.
Great, super. All right, so we're going to start with just a little bit about who we are. So I've talked. So Matt, who are you?
I'm Matt Bernard. I'm a Canadian Indigenous comedy writer working out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
I'm Jeremy Lapalme with exclamation marks. I'm an actor primarily in live stage performances, plays and musicals, as well as TV commercials, and now game writer designer.
My name's Scott Christian. My background again is sort of not gaming like these guys. I started as a conductor and musical director and composer, working primarily in theater, but then a little bit in film and TV, but have a lifelong passion for games. And that's how we wound up doing this together. So let's talk a little bit about our origin story on the project. So just zoom all the way out. The idea for Little Guardsman started between myself and my old friend Artem Komarov, who is an amazing game designer and an amazing visual artist. So between us, we had narrative and music on my side and art on Artem's side, and we had the idea for the game. And we'll get it a little bit later, talk about sort of how we approached the concept and how we shaped the game. But we basically started by making a vertical slice, making a playable prototype, and that's how these guys entered the scene.
Yeah, they shipped the prototype to us with the idea to read through it and see, like, the goal was always comedy, was to make it funny. And that's kind of where Matt and I were brought in to take this and to amp up the funny and to write dialogue and
kind of for that. Well, first we were hired to just do some of the voices for the vertical slice, a couple characters. What actors can you find in town for cheap? And we were two of them. And then going through that and then voicing it, Jared and I started talking, oh yeah, this could be a funnier joke. There's a pump up there. And Scott says, well, and kind of shit or get off the pod. Do you want to write for us? And we said, absolutely. Our inner nerds. Do you want to write comedy for a video game? Absolutely. And that's kind of how we got involved.
Yeah, and knowing that it was like performance based helped for me, because that's like, I'm not particularly a writer. I am a stage performer, but knowing that it was going to be something as a voice performance helped. When we were making the prototype, it was fully voiced.
Yes. Yeah. So and I mean, I think that's unique that in our vertical slice and in our prototype, which was very rough around the edges. We always knew that, like, with my music background and as a engineer and a producer of audio, we knew that we could nail voiceover. We knew that, like, we have a stable of amazing artists and actors that we could access. So Artem and I, when we were dreaming up the concept, we were like, well, let's for sure do fully voiced. And that's jumping ahead a little bit. Yeah. Before we move on, can we talk a little bit about what we were sort of primarily responsible for on the game? And I'll start. So as the co-creator, I mean, it's indie gaming. Any game devs in the chat know that you no one does one job. Everyone does 7 or 8 jobs.
What a dream it would be to just do one job.
So Artem and I tag teamed a lot of the leadership, but I'd say on the day-to-day, I was the narrative director. So, and we can talk about that when we hit the writer's room segment. But I'd say I was sort of shaped the story and unleashed these guys on it. Though that got real blurry, and we'll talk about that. I was also a producer on the game, so I sort of project managed the whole thing. I was the enemy of fun. I was the killer of
darlings.
Yeah,
and,
Darlings and dreams.
Managed the timelines, which meant like, yep, that's a great idea, and it'll cost us 2 weeks, so we can't. And then finally, I was the composer. Matt, you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can kind of speak for both of us in the sense.
We were brought in a similar capacity.
Yeah, very similar to just do writing, write characters, what characters would be involved in the game, coming through the gate. And through that, we kind of both got into level and game design, because you can't write a character for this game without figuring out the arc and the puzzle that they are. And that kind of opened us to a broader role of, okay, well, this person, this character is this kind of puzzle and also fit into this broader spectrum of a puzzle. And in that, we got into game design. And
it wasn't just writing funny characters and jokes very quickly.
Yeah. It was writing funny characters and jokes quickly.
Especially because the loop, the puzzle in the game is dialogue based. It is all word based.
Yeah. Well, so and we'll get to it. Don't spoil it. But I mean, I think that's something that's unique about our game, and we'll talk about this more, is that narrative led game design. And there are brilliant opportunities with that, and there are real challenges. I mean, I'd say the norm in game design often, and that this is not monolithic, is sometimes narrative gets tacked on at the very end. You build your fun game, you figure out what your mechanics are, you may have some inkling of narrative and world, and then it's again in the final leg of production that you add story, dialogue, all the stuff.
Kind of Irving Berlin it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want to say what that reference means?
That means for those of you who aren't a big musical nerds, Irving Berlin was a composer and songwriter, and he would write a bunch of songs, and then they would make movies of them or stories where the songs would be there, and then you had to write how each song connected to each other. So the songs didn't serve the narrative served the songs that way.
We're going to dig deeper into it. A hat that Matt wore was, he and I tag teamed all the voiceover recording, and he directed the performances, directed the comedic performances, primarily because this guy was out of town for a big part of that. You may have shared that role. And then Matt also voiced some characters, but Jeremy voiced some big characters.
Yeah. So we started the process with in-house with Matt and I doing the first recordings for the voices, which I think helped kind of set set how things would go for the rest of the people that we brought in.
So to sort of set expectations, to bring people who don't know Little Guardsmen up to speed, we're gonna play our third of 3 trailers, and that was a fun thing that we got to do. Our publisher was originally Versus Evil and then became Tiny Build, and that's a whole other talk that we could give. But amazing folks on both teams. But we got to be very hands-on with the marketing, and we were very involved with creating the trailers. So this is our third trailer. So Jordan, do what the slide says. Woo! Thank you.
Did I click the mic on right? Testing. Hello. What do I think makes a good gate guardsman? First and foremost, you have to be someone who likes working with people.
I am not a monster, and I do not care to be labeled as such.
You have no honor, little one.
But also, you have to be a good judge of character.
Thank you, trusting little girl.
Don't come stepping on me or I'll knock you right back on your...
Holy crap! But the most important thing is to be decisive. There's no room for second guessing in this line of work.
There's a very important deadline that could affect the fate of the entire kingdom. You don't know what you're doing.
Oh, I don't like any of my answers. I'll take a do-over.
The news is saying the city is being attacked. The Sprawl is at war.
War? That couldn't be my fault, right?
Just keep your eye on the prize.
Oh my god! There's a ghost right behind you!
Nice try, kid.
You're being sent to the front lines, soldier. I understand.
No! 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 You don't know what you're doing!
My dad leaves me in a gate guard simulator, and you get to go off and ride a dragon? I wish the developers of my game had that kind of budget.
That's the trailer. That's the trailer. Thank you, Jordan, for firing that and for being our co-pilot on
We
this.
did not have the budget for a
giant
dragon
no.
simulator.
Just a leg.
So yeah, just we're gonna blitz through this, but the idea for Little Guardsman originated partly out of we knew we wanted to make a game. We knew we wanted for it to be a story game. I think very quickly we wanted to play with fantasy tropes, which we'll talk about in influences in a sec. But we pretty quickly came up with the core character of Lil. So the protagonist in the game is, I think, unusual in gaming, which often is power fantasy. So instead, you're playing a 12-year-old girl whose father leaves her sort of manning his job. And that just keeps going. And you as the player become embroiled in court intrigue and then a war. And the idea is around you are these powerful, magical, interesting characters, and you're just a normal kid. Mm-hmm. So Matt, I want you to talk a little bit about the subversion of comedy, like the comedic element of that when we get there.
Not yet.
But core relationship between Lil and her father Hamish. We were lazy and did the dead mom Disney thing.
It's easier to have two people talking than to have three people talking.
Fair. So the big influences were we wanted to capture the charm and magic of the adventure games that I grew up playing, that we all grew up loving. Like Monkey Island is a big one. Mm-hmm. Grim Fandango is a later one. To a little bit lesser extent, King's Quest. King's Quest has the fantasy tropes, but those classic adventure games. And then we wanted to riff on the core puzzle mechanic and the game loop of Papers, Please, mm-hmm. which is a Lucas Pope's genius masterwork of a game set in a grim sort of alternate reality,
very bleak anxiety,
Soviet border guard,
where nothing can possibly.
And I mean, his game has spurred a subgenre. There's the Papers, Please there's Death and Taxes. There's a number that have sort of come out since ours. So I feel like we're part of a little wave of games inspired by Papers, Please. But top level, it's Papers, Please meets comedy fantasy. Is there anything else sort of top level, like to understand our game or understand?
No, I mean, the fun of choices matter, the decision-making aspect, and it wasn't just immediate of like in Papers, Please, or Papers, Please, where it was you do something and then it's immediate bad choices. We kind of had long structured choices. You make a choice and that's really going to affect one of the many outcomes you can have at the end of the game.
Yeah.
And so playing with that, it wasn't just immediate. You were kind of in the long game, and it was kind of like stacking dominoes. And then at the end, you see how they all fell. That was a really important element.
And each of the people who came to the gate was always going to be a mini puzzle. Mm-hmm. So a series of these small puzzles versus Papers, Please, which is similar to Papers, Please, because there is like that. Each person has something going.
Yes. Although I think a way that our game diverges is, I think, folks who may see, like, and in our marketing, it's Papers, Please, maybe like, oh, it's going to be this tight, repetitive loop. Our game also has, you leave the guard shed and you explore the world, and you get to keep conversing with the people you let in, or if you
see fallout
exactly.
from your
you see the community. Yeah.
So there's a bigger back end to our game. And I mean, that's not to disparage Papers, Please, which is such a like tight diamond of a game. Ours is a little bit looser, bigger, and more open. But I think there's a scope and a sweeping epicness that, again, we riff on. We'll talk about influences. Like it's fantasy, it's Disney, it's comedy.
That high fantasy that is sprawling world buildings.
Yeah. And one thing I always liked about your and Artem's initial idea is that I always felt there was room for a comedic Papers, Please. You know, it hadn't really been touched on in the sense that there was kind of an open market for us to really dive in and make fun of Papers, Please respectfully, because we absolutely respect Lucas Pope in the game. It's fantastic. But there was room for that to have kind of more fun, tear down the walls, and I always really like that as the concept of the game.
It's we did an interview. Someone was talking about like the games that Lucas Pope's games have inspired. So looking at our game sort of as the grandchild of Papers, Please, and looking at the Curse of the Golden Idol, Rise of the Golden Idol, as being inspired by Obra Dinn, which is follow-up, and they interviewed Lucas Pope, and he definitely has not played our game, but he was delighted by it. And he's like, "Oh, that's so neat."
That was best we could know.
Anyway, let's get to the meat. So, main inspiration, top level. We were playing with fantasy tropes, and our game is very referential. Now, there's a rule, and I think this keys into comedy and some of the challenges. Is we knew that our game would be localized. We knew that our game was going to be available in languages other than English. So we knew that it could go around the world. So when you're writing with references, you're potentially excluding people. Do you guys want to speak to that a little bit?
It was something that we were kind of informed about as we were going. There were certain styles of jokes that are very common, like alliteration, like sequences of words that start with the same letter, plays on words, or that just don't translate into a joke on the other end. So that was something we were keeping in balance, like the things that were written down versus oral jokes.
And wordplay really goes through a blender when you translate it. We'll talk. That's on a later slide.
It couldn't just be, humorous in the English language. One thing the programmer Adolfo said early on that I really took to heart.
Might have been Italo.
Oh, Italo. I'm sorry. It was Italo. I apologize. Italo said early on, even before we really got into the meat of writing, he goes, first thing I got to tell you, I've worked on games, that puns don't translate. And that really threw me for a loop, because I had always planned for a character who's in the game, Kelly the Cyclops, and she spells her name with 2 I's. And I always thought that was funny, and I was going to make more of a joke out of it in the writing, ask, why do you spell your name with 2 I's? But as soon as he said puns don't translate, I'm like, oh, we can't do that, because I and the letter I wouldn't translate. So the name tag still says Kelly with 2 I's, and then in the character name it's that. But we kind of had to lose that joke out of respect for localization and an international audience. So that was a big lesson going into it.
Be a very confusing conversation.
Exactly.
No discernible humor.
Exactly.
Well, and I also think we really thought about the player persona and who our target player was, and
nerds.
Well, but one of them was us. One of us were sort of 30-something millennials who loved those classic games. But I mean, I was picturing like the games that I played as an 8-year-old with references that went way over my head, like playing the Monkey Island games that were very funny. I didn't get half of it, but I was delighted by it. So when it came to fantasy tropes and references, and I feel like I had to sort of gavel on this a little bit, but you couldn't need to know the reference to understand the game. Like we couldn't exclude someone who's never seen Ghostbusters, someone who's never. There's a riff on Christmas Carol and Shakespeare in our game. Our game is all over the place. We didn't want the player to ever be isolated or excluded by a reference. So we could be referential, but it couldn't hang on the reference.
Yeah, you could. It would, if you didn't know the reference, it might just be, that's a strange thing to say.
Yes.
But life goes on. But if you get the reference,
then it's kind of a nice,
it's kind of like this game. All these Easter eggs are nested in if you get it, and if you don't, it's still a delight.
It's still
fantasy tropes meets and we had a ratio: 70% fantasy, 30% retro tech, and we set that around 1990. So you've got fantasy and magic and wizards and fax machines and sort of analog
neon
tech.
lights and torches in the same building,
and it's really not explained.
Your cassette player,
And we've got some passionate, like there are basically 3 of us talking in the Discord who are very passionate about our game, who have questions. I don't have answers because there aren't answers. It's just loosely defined, and that was sort of a visual guideline. So the artists had that, like when drawing a background, we want this to be 70% medieval fantasy. And 30%, there needs to be a spin on it. And then last but not least, we touched on it. It's fantasy, retro tech, and pop culture references. And we mean pop culture in the broadest sense. And I don't think it's 2024 pop culture. I think it's like 1985 to
Kind of, yeah, as long as we've been around,
Yeah.
mid '80s to now.
So I want you guys to talk a little bit about your comedic inspiration for Little Guardsmen.
Gotcha.
Well, it's the stuff I grew up watching a lot of British comedy,
Mhm.
which Monty Python is kind of the most now mainstream, but
It kind of, we're most well known in that way.
But a lot of these British situation comedies that the turns of phrase were very, very crucial and worded and specific, and a lot of wordplay in the British comedy.
The one thing I always took from British comedy, and I hope I'm getting this right, it was Stephen Fry, who, brilliant mind, brilliant British comedian, and I'll say philosopher, talked about British comedy versus American comedy, and British in terms of also Canadian, kind of as a subdivision of that. And he talked about the movie Animal House, and the scene where there's some guys playing a guitar, a nice slow song, and Jim Belushi's there in a toga, and he takes a guitar and he smashes it.
John
Belushi.
His
I'm
brother
getting
Jim.
names wrong.
His brother Jim was nowhere to be seen.
Nowhere to see, but John Belushi takes a guitar and smashes it. John Belushi was American humor. He was the one with the biggest
bombast,
biggest package at the party, we'll say. And British comedy is the guy playing the guitar, the person who forgot to bring their package to the party, kind of a thing. And so it's kind of more playing the fool, playing the underdog in that.
Yeah, and subversive, and a lot of it is very subversive. It's setting up
the biggest, loudest,
and like anti-establishment. Lil as a character is decidedly anti-establishment within your own choices. You're the underdog for sure.
Do you want to talk about Billy Wilder?
Oh yeah, Billy Wilder, fantastic director of some of my favorite films. The Apartment, 1, 2, 3, Some Like It Hot. I think he did The Great Race too, didn't he?
Oh yeah,
yeah, The Great Race, and just his
Pink Panther, like
all of those. Yeah, just I still love his humor in movies because his setups are great. His appreciation of character and letting a character just kind of stew or be in the moment and try to solve the problem. Irma Deuce is another one. Irma Deuce is great. That's always been a big influence, Billy Wilder and his humor.
Yeah, and like his movies tend to have big characters, and like with Matt Groening as well, the next person, or like The Simpsons, like characters, building these characters, which is the game has a lot of characters in it, and these shows and these movies like Python, like it's very much a lot of characters.
Yeah,
this is a bit of an aside. When we originally started shopping it around, there was a real question of, is this a kid's game? And we knew it wasn't a kid's game. But the fact that the protagonist was a 12-year-old girl, I think people jumped right to that, and we said, like, no,
the cartoony style too,
exactly
lended to that.
And I think the core impulse was we wanted somewhere between The Simpsons and South Park, but we wanted to recreate the magic of Saturday morning cartoons for us, or Sunday night cartoons. I think that's when Simpsons aired.
Sunday afternoon, evening, early evening,
most of the weekend for that matter.
And we can talk about this later, but like there's. We kill Lil. There are game overs. There's swears. There's beeped swears and unbeeped swears. And we really, I think, worked hard to find that like knife's edge or that tightrope where it still felt like, and I think The Simpsons is a good reference point.
It's appropriate, but can also be, if you're really, stuck up, it's outrageous. Drop your monocles, kind of a feel. But the next one, the influence that we've added with a sigh is Seth MacFarlane. Seth MacFarlane is a fantastic showman, brilliant comedian, brilliant writer and performer.
Hell of a singer.
All of it. Fantastic, and hats off and kudos and all the praise to him. We added the side just because I feel a lot of his humor has been adopted by kind of a more brash
it would be more like the American,
really mean, crass, punching down, going for the crude or outlandish jokes that we didn't want to hit all the time,
But the performance style, there's no denying the vocalizing, character voicing, which is a big part of what we're doing.
These vivid characters. I mean, I would also say, and I don't think we ever talked about it, but like a comp where I think someone who loves Rick and Morty might see Rick and Morty in our game.
Of course.
But again, there's associations there that I don't think are true for Little Guardsmen.
No.
And then last but not least, and I would say if there are any game devs watching or who watch later, Don't hire yourself over and over. Like our three nerddoms, like the things that we're passionate about are very different. There's overlap, but it's different. So in my head, I was thinking like the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett, which is a fantasy series that is one of the few things that like perfectly mashes up fantasy and comedy. And I didn't ask them, I didn't say like, go read it. Like, no. So I feel like each of us was semi-conscious of each other's references.
And you kind of brought your own thing to the party as well.
Yeah. So comedic inspirations, let's talk a little bit nuts and bolts about Little Guardsman and what's going on under the hood. As I said, the narrative-led game design, which I think is unique. I think usually narrative is in addition to where mechanical design led game design. And that was a challenge. Like it was a challenge in that like we had to, like, we knew the story, we knew these characters, we knew and then we had to make sure there were compelling puzzles that fit with all this text.
And I think it's because the text was dialogue. A lot of it is dialogue between Lil and whoever.
I'd say majority, all of it.
Well, I mean, there's also like the text-based stuff, like the end of day thing.
End of day, yeah.
But a lot of it is inquisitive dialogue in these puzzles.
But I do think, and this is where Lucas Pope's Papers, Please DNA, you are doing actions. So yes, you're talking, yes, you're interrogating, but you're using a set of sort of fantasy comedic tools. Like in an interrogation, which we'll get into, you're making choices and doing different things to try to get the right answer. It is not a pure point and click adventure game. I think there are people who came in thinking it was just Papers, Please. We're like, oh, this is different. And there are people who may have thought it's, oh, this is just going to be Monkey Island or Night in the Woods.
Exploring around.
Yeah, and we're like, oh, there's a tighter puzzle loop here than I may have guessed. But I want to stay on comedy. We can talk about it. But I'd say, sorry, going back to our notes. We divvied up the writing, but we were considerate of, we were writing a macro story, a narrative, which had some branching, but I'd say was the most linear. Like you were choosing the variables, you were choosing who your enemy is, you were choosing love interests, you were choosing some key variables, but the story is the story. Within each level, there are 12 levels in our game. There's even more branching that then sort of gets tied up at the end of the level. And then within a turn is where there's the most branching. So in a turn, one of the tight design things, the constraints is you have 3 action points. So you can do 3 things before you have to choose to admit, deny, or jail people. So I want to stop talking now. Tell me about, let's talk a little bit about writing a turn.
Writing a turn, kind of jumping into it, we all kind of divvied up characters for the day or character ideas. We said, we have this day, we have to have 6 or 7 characters, whatever it may be. You take 3, you take 3, you got to take 3, whatever it may be, and then we'll whittle it down.
And do that.
And within the writing of the turn, we had to have a puzzle within this person, whether it's appropriate to let them in, deny them, or jail them. There had to be a right answer in that way.
And I would harp on you guys I would say, like, what's the source of truth? How's a player gonna know? Because it couldn't be arbitrary. So you can either derive the answer from interrogating them. You either, the source of truth is what they're telling you. The source of truth may be information you're getting externally from, there's a royal writ, which has some sort of
guidelines,
obscure, opaque clues in the advisors. So things you've learned previously, like you need to remember, oh yeah, this is
I was told to do, look out for this.
But it was important to us that it never be
completely arbitrary.
Punishing. Yeah.
So you had to kind of figure out the best way to do it. And one of the best fun things in it was the chronometer 3000. Chronometer 3000. The fact that you could try something, it didn't work, or you didn't get the answer you wanted, and so you could rewind and try again. And that's something Papers, Please didn't have. Papers, Please had this looming anxiety of, oh my God, you have to make the right decision or everyone dies. We wanted to, Scott put it perfectly, early on in this game design and narrative-led design, we wanted to make failing fun.
Yeah.
So that if you got the wrong choice, it wasn't heartbreaking. It wasn't punishing and then made you cry.
Usually they're funny.
Yeah. And if someone lobs a Molotov cocktail at 12-year-old Lil, you're only ever sent back minutes.
Yeah. And we wanted to have the option to go back and try again, so you can explore around within these turns. So we built in the time machine element, the chronometer, as a narrative piece that suited what we wanted.
Yeah, it wasn't just an arbitrary item. It did fit in with the storyline in that way. But at the heart of it, it was a choose your own adventure. You choose what you want. You can go back and change that choice if you want. But eventually, you choose your own adventure and you get to the ending. And that was the main drive of the game. What the overall ending you achieved.
And then, sorry, I just want to talk briefly about, I think we can talk about Lil. So we tried to not kill ourselves in terms of infinite branches. So when you were interrogating people,
I tried to kill you, though.
You did. You did.
I wanted 32 endings. I started branching earlier on and just spiraled out of control. But Scott,
I'm going to book a therapy session.
The string is just from wall to
Scott,
wall.
as a fantastic project manager, said, no, we can't. It has to be relatively contained. And of course it had to.
And we failed. Our scope, we overblew our scope, but we finished on time and we finished on budget. But our word count was way over what I thought it would be. But instead of like in Monkey Island, where you have situational dialogue responses, so a character says something to you, you're presented with 5 responses to that thing. A challenge for us, and this was there in the prototype, was your response. You are either going to trust, doubt, or tease. So you have your like sweet response or earnest response, your detective response, or your scamp response.
Sarcastic jerk.
and I think like we didn't create Baldur's Gate 3 in terms of that infinite scope, but I think people were able to role play Lil their way.
Yes, that ended up, I think, being an unexpected bonus of the way that we had designed the game. Is we realized quickly, like, you are going to feel very much in charge of your Lil, how you play through the game. If you want to be nice, or if you want to be mean, or if you want to like. There's the tools you have. There's a bullwhip. There's a truth spray. You've got options of how you can play the game in a variety of different ways.
And those choices, how to respond, weren't just for flavor and weren't just for fluff. They were also, those would lead you to discoveries and furthering the story. So if you played as a jerk the whole time and teased, you might not have progressed the story if you were nice that one time, because there were certain right answers within the responses, not just the tool choice or the interrogation choice. It was also within how you, the player, react to the character.
And in pretty unsubtle ways, we tried to write, like, okay, someone comes up and starts speaking to you. They say something sus, or they say something that you know not to be true. The right answer is to doubt that person. So that is narrative-led puzzle design.
Yes.
Which, if we have time, we can talk a little bit about the game that we're making now. We are highly narrative, and it's somewhat narrative-led puzzle design, but we're giving ourselves a bit of a break. You do other things other than talk. Let's talk a little bit about a specific turn. Okay, sorry. So this is a turn breakdown. We're not going to make people squint and read this, but this is 2 side-to-side scripts that it's basically a turn that, depending on your choices, is one way or a very different way.
What you did with a character can lead them to be Gary the good or Gary the evil kind of thing. Later on, he returns, and what you chose for him, he's either the good track or the evil track.
Yeah. So this is one of the characters that I think I wrote this, and I voiced this character, Gary. And it very much is, on the one hand, it's Smeagol and Gollum. It's very much riffing on Lord of the Rings as a parody of Gollum with his power crystal that it's his present.
His present, not precious.
Not precious. I thought that would be too on copyright purposes. But and this is kind of the breakdown of how the writing of a turn looked.
The kind of templates that we used for all characters.
So let's walk you through what a turn looks like. And I can't remember how many turns there are in the game. 100. There's 12 levels. 12, like
6 or 7 or 5 each level. Something like that. Yeah.
Like let's say there's 75 turns in the game. So this time 75 or more, because again, you can get an A or a B. If you're at war with one army or the other, you're going to see the other one. So
one thing I'll say to game devs out there is that because our scope is so big with so many turns, so many characters, having a good template to work from is key, so that the language is kind of approachable across the board from everyone. It was always in the same format.
If it's a repeatable puzzle in particular,
make it approachable on to all departments, all of that everyone knows what we're working from.
Now, what we're looking at, and we'll blitz through this. That a challenge is because we formatted it like a script. It seems linear, but the reality is that anyone playing can do this in any sequence. So we had to write considering, okay, if they talk first and then they use the truth spray and then they call one of the advisors, that needs to make as much sense as talk, talk, talk.
Yeah.
Or tool, tool, tool. Or so that was it was a real rat's nest.
We had to make sure you didn't cover something with the second action point that would be repeated by the third action point.
We found some shortcuts. We found some ways to be like, okay, if they do this, they can't possibly hear this, so we can double that text up. But just quickly, introduction, they come up. If you talk to them, you can trust out or tease them, which has variations. Again, there's a second and a third layer if you talk. And by the third, you're learning more. And then you get into the tools. And again, we'll find a way to share this presentation if anyone wants to look more closely. And again, this turn goes very differently depending on which version you get.
Yes, and there's the end of day, the result from your action that you did. You got 3 stars. You got a 4th star even. You did great.
So, and let's quickly talk about that. So after, and this is something we learned through testing, and this is something we learned through feedback from our publisher early on. I naively thought that the most satisfying version of this game was you make choices and you see them pay off in the middle and far distance. So the idea is you did this thing and then an hour later,
the world will be different.
The world will be different, and maybe you'll connect it. And that just wasn't clicky enough, or that wasn't immediately satisfying enough.
Yeah. What phrase did you use? Like the initial,
like immediate feedback,
immediate pleasure, or something like that.
Or delayed gratification wasn't enough.
Yes,
so
immediate gratification. Yeah.
So after every, let's say, in a guard shift, which is within a level has your guard shift as the primary puzzle, and then you go off exploring, and you get to visit and see the results. See that
there is some of that too.
But after every turn, you get your score, and there's a failure threshold. You know, if you get an average of 2 stars or less, game over. Or you have to go back
the
and
level. Yeah, good enough.
So again, the player that
even that only gets added in Act 2.
Totally. There's a fail threshold in Act 1. It's
easier.
Yeah.
Like 2.5. Right?
But there's a player persona who wants to get perfect, who wants to find that 4-star. So they get it immediately. They can go back and spend a few minutes instead of getting all the way to the end of the, let's say, 20 minutes and have to go all the way back. So you get to continue. You get to be like 3 out of 4 stars. Good enough. I'm just playing for
the city.
Yeah, exactly. And writing that text was an opportunity for humor. That was sort of like the voice of God. That was our voice communicating
you
with
let
the
them
player.
in? Maybe you shouldn't have. Kind of a hint.
And from a game design perspective, 3-star was good. So if you got a 2-star or 1-star, that text would guide you. There would be a hint in that suggesting what to do. We deliberately left the difference between 3 and 4-star up to the gods of the internet or the walkthrough, and so that bugs some people for sure. Do you guys have any memories of writing the like result hint text?
The result hint text. I mean, my favorite thing was the big end of the day results. Because you have your guard shift, and each character you get a 4-star rating.
Let's
save that.
No, let's jump to that.
Okay,
my ulcer is tearing up as we talk about it.
Because within the guard shift, you have 6 characters, and you get a 4-star result on each of them. And cumulatively, at the end of your shift, you get the overall rating, 3 or 4 stars. Then you go to explore the city, and you could see people you let in who are in the city. But if you didn't let them in, or you sent them to jail, we always wondered, like, okay, what happened to them? How can we tell their story? So after you explore the city and do all that and end the day going to bed, you get a full day recap of what happened to those characters. And that's not necessarily in the day. It kind of gives you what happened for the rest of their life based on you not letting them in or denying them or jailing them. And those were my absolute favorite things to write.
This is a lot of where we got into the world building and that high fantasy stuff that we love so much. This very dense, very populated world that we kind of kept
because we threw a lot of referential things in there.
A lot of big referential things.
The character Buttface was a real parody of a character from Stardew Valley, or the protagonist from Stardew Valley, who And so from that, again, I say it was my favorite thing because I would approach Scott and Jer with like, okay, here's the end results for this character. And it was like 5 pages. And Scott would be like, no, make it 1 page. And I'm like, okay, page and a quarter. And I'd have to edit them down because it was just too many words, too much information. But the butt-faced character, we got to play a lot with the other games of Stardew Valley, like the Haunted Chocolatier. Is that so? Like, if you let him in, the character went on a Haunted Chocolatier-esque adventure. If you denied him, it was kind of a sour, a Stardew Valley ending where he poisons the Duke coming to the big luau thing, and we got into a lot of referentials there. And I loved writing those because those were just the most fun for me because we could just do anything with the character. We didn't have to show it. Didn't have to really explain it. Just this is what happened for the rest of their life because you denied them.
And I think our game doesn't work for someone that just clicks through story. Like there's too much text, too much talking for that persona. But I think it's pretty clear, or it's telegraphed to the player that this is bonus content.
Yeah.
So I mean, there is a player persona who I'm sure like relished and loved that, and that's where we really built out the world and made it greater than Lil's lens. Like we really widened the
lens.
frame.
That's good and crazy. Yeah.
But also
you could click through that
for sure, and by design, like we didn't nest.
It's
hints
not
in that.
voiced
No,
as well.
that
We
was
knew
just
that
for
was
fun, just if you wanted to have a laugh.
Extra lore.
Yeah.
Anything on writing those for you? Any memories of?
For it was a lot of them where I would take other stories and do like parody riffs on existing
whatever that
places
character was from or referencing.
So let's make this useful to
All right.
somebody. Some general comedy writing stuff. This is where I'll really shut up. So just to preface it, my background is like I've done a lot of writing in my life, and it was my role to sort of keep the integrity of the story together. And I think for everyone on the team, just for our team was maybe 7.5. We had 3 writers or two writers, myself, who was on the writing team, Artem, who co-creator and co-director, 2 programmers, 8, and 2 artists.
Yeah.
So a team of 8. But brought you guys on to be the comedy writers. I think I'm funny. I think I'm responsible for some good jokes in the game. But,
1 or 2.
But it's your area of seriously. But it's your area of expertise. So I want you guys to sort of take a step back. Imagine a game dev has come to you and says, I'm writing this game. I really want it to be funny. I don't know anything about comedy.
I mean, there's no guarantee on what is going to be funny. Comedy is subjective in nature. Someone who finds a fart joke funny, the other person will find that too crass or crude. So there's nothing guaranteed to be funny. There's just certain elements or tactics you can use to best portray what you find funny. Because at the heart of it, you have to find it funny. You have to have that spark within you and wanting to share it with the audience. And ways to do that are, to classic setups, the rule of 3s. It's 1, 2, 3, and the third is the punchline, and that kind of all comes down to it's setup, it's reinforcing the setup, and then the twist,
subvert expectations.
The subversion is the main key, and say dissecting comedies like dissecting a frog. Nobody's interested, and eventually the frog dies of it. But there's also a kind of a formula for comedy that some people have put forward called benign violation theory. And that kind of works with the rules of 3s, where it's a setup and a violation of what you expect is going to happen, but it's a benign violation. It's nothing too harsh or crass or crude or anything to really isolate people or make them feel
it'll
uncomfortable.
Shock, but not offend.
Yeah.
Ideally, it's
and
not something that's.
And that was important to us, especially with a child protagonist.
Yes.
A source of humor was a subversion of expectations. A child should not be in this position. A child should not be saying and doing those things.
Yeah.
But there is a line.
There is, you can't cross the line. And a kind of another rule when writing, comedy or drama is that to consider the audience the middle ground. And with drama, it's great problems happening to great people.
Aspiring.
Kings, kings and rulers, and these fantastic problems that you couldn't ever hope. And so you're looking up at these people and problems and thinking, thank God I'm not them. But comedy is on the lower spectrum. The audience is middle ground, so they're looking down. They're looking down at the choices these fools have made. They're literally slipping on fruit. How could you do that? I'm higher than you. Ha ha ha. You're so stupid. Kind of a feel.
Well, it's a control thing. It's like you feel like you have an element of control over
that. Yeah, you're kind of laughing at what the character does. There's so many different rules and tactics. The audience loves feeling smart, loves knowing something a character is doing something on stage, and then when the other character finds out, the audience feels smart. Well, I knew that before you, kind of a feel. There's all these rules we can ramble on and on about, but also you have to respect the audience in terms of timing. I say when I teach comedy, the art of comedy is the ART, the audience reaction time. You have to set something up within the right pace. You go too fast, they lose it, and the punchlines is lost. You go too slow,
they get ahead of you.
They get ahead of you, and you can't let the audience get ahead of you. So you have to kind of toe that middle ground. And I wish I could tell you what exactly that is. It's just a feel thing.
But this is a good segue, because the challenge with games, and I want to talk a little bit about the obstacles that we hopefully that can be of value and be actionable and for people making games, is what happens if comedy is timing, what happens when the player controls the timing?
Yeah.
So, Jared.
So we wanted to address this with, in the creation of jokes, having the joke be on the next slide, as it were. Like if people are talking, a joke's not
speech bubble kind of a thing,
the next bubble that comes up is kind of the reveal of what the joke is. And we wanted it voiced so that within longer passages, the intention would be clear in a way that reading it, you might not get the joke, but the way it's voiced will reinforce what the how you're hearing it and what is being emphasized. So having it something that could be clicked through, but also land. Once you click it, we know how it's going to be heard and be interpreted.
A lot of the fun we discovered when watching people film themselves doing playthroughs and stuff like that is that they click.
We love you, content creators.
Oh yes, absolutely. Some of the stuff you've created have just blown our minds, and we're so agog about it. But a lot of the fun we had is that they'll click and our character will say something. And they'll say, well, I don't think that's very true. And they'll click on doubt, and Lil says, well, I don't think that's very true. They're like, oh my God, that's what I was thinking. And that plays into the audience feeling smart. So setting something up, having a second to think about it, the player to have a second to think about it really worked in our favor, because the audience kind of did their own setup in that way. And then the knockout punch was...
What do you expect when you click, I trust this person? What do you kind of expect?
And it worked in both ways, when it matched what you expected or it wasn't what you expected in a comedic way.
A challenge for us was the amount of content that you don't see if you just play through once. So it's a sort of tip of the iceberg. We really had to be like, okay, we need to make sure this piece of data, this piece of information, we're threading it in multiple places. So
somewhere.
And for a joke, if it's a callback, and if it feels like a callback, we need to make sure it's something. So I'd say as a result, a lot of the humor was very self-contained and within a single turn, because we couldn't count on memory. We can't, if someone plays this,
puts it down for months,
comes back to it. So that was part of it. I'm motoring now because we have 10 minutes left.
I know, geez, the time flew by. We thought we wouldn't fill it.
And quickly, I'm going to go to the next slide. These are some actual questions from the localization team. So our game was translated into Spanish, German, and simplified Chinese. So there were localization folks in each of those languages, and there was just this spreadsheet that kept getting bigger and bigger with questions like, what are knife hands? And what does this mean? Is Petey a parrot or other bird? We did our best.
What does this mean? What is chest burster?
So I mean, this is an aside, but I think as AI tools come for localization jobs, I don't see AI being able to translate our insanity as brilliantly as the Game Scribes, that's the company that did our localization, did, and they took the care. They were like, and I'm sure they were like, I probably know what this means. But let's make sure, because they're weirdos. Anyway, let's jump very quickly. Do you want to talk about how we ran it like a writer's room?
Yeah, we were separate at the time, so we would each of us take these characters throughout a level. We would grab a couple of characters, these turns, and go off to our separate corners and write,
Yeah.
and then bring them back together. And at the end of the week, we would do this weekly, and then read through.
All kind of pitch each other. All right, so here are my characters.
Here's
I'd
the
like
turn,
for the
and
level.
someone
Here's
would
yours,
play
yeah.
the turn.
Yeah. And this would be with the whole team.
Yeah.
Towards the end, we looped in the whole team, and we cast someone as the player. So we'd say, for instance, Bruno, who is our background artist. We'd say, okay, Bruno, you're making the choices.
Who doesn't know what the choice? Like the three of us.
Yeah,
know
we
what our
know
things
the
are.
whole scope of the turns. Yeah.
He's gonna play as the player, run, and we would walk through
The dry paper run, in
and
that
that
way,
would benefit us in a way of hearing each other's
Yeah.
stuff. It would benefit the artists in a way of hearing what we're talking about and having a sense of what these characters are.
And coming
and
up
the
with
programmers for knowing what kind of tools we would be needing. Everyone was involved in that way. So like bringing us all together and reading it out loud. For the comedy in particular, just hearing it out loud and just hear people laughing.
Yes.
Is it funny?
Yeah.
If
If
it's
we
not,
find
then-
it funny. Does at least one other person in the room find
and
it
if
funny?
you
We
find
can
it
run with
funny,
yeah.
then that's it.
Yeah.
You're the audience. But like, it really like.
I'd say a gift was that we like, and I don't know how to overcome this if you're a solo dev, if you're doing this by yourself. I think the fact that our tastes are different, like it was just a constant game of trying to crack each other up and delight each other. I think if I was a solo dev, I would be brave and get your text read by actors on the internet, by your friends. Just hear it in the air.
And you can't.
You don't
speak
have to
more.
do it, but you could.
Yeah, just the brainstorming sessions. I mean, I've had the luxury of working with Jer, writing comedy with him for 20 years now. Say. And just one of my favorite memories of coming up with characters, because when we had a level, we had kind of an idea of the theme or thematic elements of the level, like night shifts. We knew we were going to be monsters, that kind of thing. But when we were coming up with one of the last levels with the war, we needed 3 water warriors. And I remember this specifically talking with you, Jared. It was, coming up, okay, so we'll have the pirate character. We'll have kind of a warrior mermaid. Oh, we need another water-based character. We couldn't come up with anything. And Jared just off the cuff, I don't know, how about someone with a particularly vicious pet fish? And that was just pulled out of nowhere. Nothing referential in that way, but just... And that just came from, I don't think either of us could have come up with that just on our own, just thinking, banging our heads against the wall. But riffing on ideas, that is really key.
And setting up these situations for you to write your way out of.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'd say
you can write your way out of these things. It just require some creativity.
And not being too precious about ideas. That's a key thing with the writer's room. You can't come in saying, I have a character, and if these two said, oh, no, I don't think about that, being like, well, you guys don't respect my word, forget it. No, it's between the 3 of us coming up with an idea each until there's 12 ideas, and we all go with the best one, kind of a thing.
And then start
not being too precious.
And having a very clear sense of what the game is and what it isn't, like having parameters, like what are the core relationships, and the things we're writing need to reinforce and support those. But it's fun because I think I'd say our story has a lot of integrity and it makes sense, and it doesn't feel random. It's sometimes silly, but never random. Mm-hmm. But there are these moments of absurdism, like the pet fish, like Sprankle's the dead cat that they're taking to bury in the pet cemetery. And I think that's such a strong flavor that if that's your main flavor, that will define your game. But I think we were very strategic about deploying
absurdism.
Yeah, because they say, absurdism or silliness is another phrase for it is coming from left field. But if everything comes from left field, there is no left field anymore. So you have to have a center field and a groundedness
need
for things to come from left field.
Structure to then attack it.
And I think something that helped us and anchored the comedy is we weren't afraid to be earnest. And I think this core relationship between father and daughter, with real dramatic stakes, and Lil experiences love and grief and like her friendships that she forges are real. That always was a good anchor for the comedy. Yeah. As silly as we got, that a scene later you're going to be feeling something.
You're gonna but just the softer moments with her and her dad, and that really helped anchor things.
4 minutes, holy shit.
Jesus.
Jordan, we're not going to play the second video. I slaved over the second video.
I know.
But
Okay, working hot on the stove.
So I think one of the key elements to making our game funny is the voice cast that we have. And we are, surprise folks, we are graced with the presence of one of the stars of Little Guardsmen, Jeremy Lapalme.
Jeremy Lapalme. Okay.
Matt did
I did the announcer and radio voice.
Every radio voice. I did the voice of Satan because
Because he was project manager.
There you go. No, because it's in Latin, and I didn't want to make any of the actors phonetically learn the Latin. So I was
late at night. You're just
in my basement with my wife upstairs, being like, "What the hell is
you're doing?
chanting?
Tongue,
Are you okay,
It's
honey?"
a dead language. Give it up.
So, Jeremy, I'd love for you to. Here's some of our cast.
Brilliant cast.
Yeah. And
some of the characters.
Some of the characters they play. Just our pool was from our theater colleagues, our film and TV colleagues, comedy. I've worked at Second City in Toronto on the music side, so I had sort of a decade of Second City
Hungry
cast.
actors.
Exactly. And that's Gillian Welsh voices Lil. She has I don't know. Everyone else had 25%. By comparison, she had 75% of the text.
We had 3 days booked for her. We needed 4 or 5 by the end of it. Yeah.
So, Jer, tell me a little bit about, and sorry, just quickly, this is the breakdown. It shows that we had a cast of...
The 14.
Covering almost 100 characters. And we were very careful about not doubling up, making sure no one spoke to themselves or next to themselves. Play Jeremy video. We're not going to do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Jeremy.
These are some of the characters that I play on the... with the fish is Malcolm, the court jester. He's one of the 3 advisors to Lil, characters that you can call on during the gameplay to give you clues or influence.
Just chaotic advice.
Malcolm's in particular was kind of something chaotic, so something more on the absurd side, more unexpected. In the middle is Magnus the Magnificent. This is 2 goblins on top of each other's shoulders in a wizard's robe, trying to sneak into the sprawl on a day there shouldn't be.
I've just heard we have time to hear your work.
We do.
So Jordan, whenever you'd like,
lucky you, viewers.
Let's hear Jeremy. Thank you.
You still weren't asked to join said quorum, but she was.
And you will hear these 3 characters in the story.
What?
Echo on the right, the wizard.
She is here.
Gandalf, not
She's here. She's here. Lil is here. I really have to work on my subtlety.
Ah, Lil, you're here.
I was all ready to tell you to kick any freeloading bums out on their asses. But I guess since you unlocked the food tunnel operation, and since I'm not technically allowed to requisition all the food for the bacchanal I've been planning for ages, you can let these emaciated bastards in. Goodbye! In the grand scheme of things, nobody cares about this, whoever this is. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, nobody cares about you either. Or me. Or this phone call. You know what? I'm hanging up now. You really bummed me out, kid.
Hello! We would like to enter. I would like to enter the sprawl, please.
And you are?
Magnus the Magnificent, renowned member of the Mages Guild. Surely you have heard of me. Salutations to you, little sister of this big, beautiful world. My journeys across this land have brought me here to your doors. What a sweet fortune have in store for me today? That I do not know, but it's a hell of a ride, let me tell you. I call this particular blend Peace Blossom, bringing joy and mirth wherever she goes. Medicinal, of course. You still here? It's over. Go home. Well, I guess you are home. But in case you're not, go.
I forgot about that little Easter egg. The Ferris Bueller's
that little referential ending.
To Ferris Bueller, though now... Ferris Bueller, though now Deadpool.
Yeah,
there's
a third
layer.
I don't know how old you are.
I remember you being better.
Really amused at the time, but now hearing it back.
No, just quickly before we move off of voice, hearing that back, what do you think? What do you remember about doing it?
Recording it in-house, like the fact that we were able to do that, that's something that a kind of skill that we have thanks a lot to being in the theater and in performance in your composing and in writing music. So we had the capacity to do this in house, which is a great blessing. And also just being able to tell the story in our very specific way, by having it voiced rather than having you read it. And
And I think, as I said earlier, our structure for that, and there are so many phenomenal voice actors out there. I'd say be rigorous in your casting. Don't just because someone says they want to do the voice, like make sure you hear them on the material. I was sort of hunkered down with headphones, listening to the audio capture, making sure there wasn't sort of ambient, making sure the quality was good, while Matt was working directly with the actors.
With the timing and the emphasis on words, because you could say same thing two different ways, but we always had, I mean, working with the three of us, doing all the characters in our writer's room sessions, we always had an idea of the focus of the comedy within those broken up lines, as in speech bubbles and clicking through. And so an actor, you know, we always had in mind, and there was a fun play between specific phrasing and emphasis we wanted, but sometimes an actor would surprise us with their take and stuff like that, and we're always open to that. And it wasn't just line reading, like, do it this way, completely this way, but sometimes because of the nature of it, we did have to have certain emphasis on certain words for a joke to land.
Yeah, we're trying to offset expectation by having the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Or because we're talking, we have the text broken up into speech bubbles. If it's a long piece, like, okay, we need you to ramp up to the edge of the cliff on this, and then you need to pay it off in the next speech bubble.
So the specific, and I was happy to direct that. It wasn't just actors do what you want, and it wasn't just us do it our way. It was a mix of both, but I'd say even like 70-30, we're specific with this phrasing.
Just to motor, I want to quickly touch on the gift of our art team, who were surprisingly funny.
They had a good sense of humor to them.
Our art director and character artist, his name is Hafa Gallardo, and the background artist is Bruno Ishihira. They're both based in Brazil. So we have a core of Toronto talent and then some international folks on our team. And I mean, both of them, their English is amazing, but English is not their first language. So they were functionally not a translation team, but hey, is this funny? Like, do you get this? Or if you imagine this in Portuguese or in Spanish, is it still funny?
Make sense?
So the process of, we would come up with the characters, and then we'd ask them to start sketching. And at first it was very like, do this, but then it became a real conversation. So do you guys remember that?
I mean, I certainly do. A lot of the characters earlier on, I think this is relatively in order from, you know, top left to bottom right. Kind of a scope of the game. A lot of the characters and gags and stuff like that, we were referencing pop culture and fantasy things that we knew about. But then once the art started coming through the pipeline and we saw locations, we started referencing the art. Specifically, a character I created, Scary Tree Monster, was based off a tree in one of the location arts. I'm like, oh, that kind of looks like a person. Oh, Scary Tree Monster. So they really started feeding into each other, which was a great dynamic, a great play back and forth.
And I'd say one of the challenges was, okay, that's too fantasy, or that's not fantasy enough. So back to that 70-30 fantasy and then something else. And then also needing to suggest hints through the art, but not give it away. So one of the iconic characters that my wife Tringa voices is Chloe, who's a psychotic, homicidal Disney princess. She's second row, maybe seventh or eighth in that tiny
next to
picture.
The wagon and butt face.
Looks like Belle.
Looks like Belle. We went back and forth with how much blood there should be on her apron about 6 times.
Yep, I believe it.
So I'd say if there's learning from that, it's yes, we were the writers, and I think this is true for indie games, but like, let good ideas come from anywhere.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Are we we're going over time.
We're close. Right. Cutting room floor. This is going to fall on the cutting room floor. The intended scope for our game was much bigger than what we ended up doing. I think we underestimated how much content it represented, like in a turn, in a level. So we're like, oh, we're definitely going to need 20 levels, and we ended up with 12.
But there's 3 acts and then down to 2 acts.
But it's better. It's so much better.
Condensing it, cutting the fat in that way, and not even cutting fat. It came down to cutting parts of meat as well, so that all that's left is lean, good meat. Kind of to use a butcher's reference.
I don't know if a butcher would agree. With
that.
Lean, a little fat.
That's why I got fired from it.
Jeremy?
Anything else?
Just about things that got cut. or me making you cut your brilliant ideas.
Yeah, I mean, we were considering having another whole meter mechanism of balancing your resources in another way, but it was so much and I think it just goes like we overshot, we overwrote
In the vision,
Yes,
in the vision, yeah.
but even within the scripts as well, we had more than we needed that we were able to cut, which I think is a stronger place to come at it than, oh, we need to take this
more fill,
to
yeah.
fill, and that I think was because of the big world building we started with. We had a lot to play with.
And one thing I'll throw in there that Scott loves me mentioning is the kill count.
Yes.
I went through the game and I made a list of how many people Lil inadvertently led to their deaths. And the documents are still out there and on my computer, not in public anyways. But I think
you as the player,
yes,
the amount of murder that your choices lead to.
I wanted always at a number at the very end of the game. Bloop, by the
How
way,
many people died?
Yeah, your actions led to this many people dying, and I think the least was like 14 people, and the most was like 25,000. The scope of it,
and that's true in the game.
Oh yeah,
but
it wasn't the right flavor, and that. But I was just always, I was happy to know how many people.
Yes, and it just fell outside of what is our game, and is it that Simpsons Saturday morning cartoon thing? It was a little outside of the threshold.
Yeah,
I designed a sound effect. You can kill Heinrich von Pyre, a vampire. You can kill him, and the sound effect, it was beautiful. It was amazing. It was fire and like a laser, and then his screams.
Yep.
And then his screams. It was perfect. And Matt was like, "This is horrifying."
Brutal.
So we are just about at time. I do want to do final thoughts. So I want to make sort of circle back to making this actionable. If there are aspiring game writers, narrative designers, game devs out there, what's a big piece of learning that you took from this experience?
For me, it was having a wealth of knowledge of comedic influences and scripts. It wasn't just one source material that we were trying to emulate or trying to copy. It was studying comedy from now and older and being able to pull ideas, not stealing ideas, not like, oh, this is ours, they'll never know, but just having a lot of reference points. For this game in particular, it really aided us. And so if you really want to get into comedy writing, if you want to get into comedy writing, study comedy. Study comedy that's now, study comedy that's earlier. It's just going to help you understand where forming a joke as an idea has come from and how it grew to what it is now for audiences and in a different medium, online and everything quicker and faster and 30-second memes and reels and all this stuff. Study comedy if you want to be a comedy writer.
And I think what I'd recommend is really have a voice for your protagonist. This is something we get lucky with because coming at it as actors, like making characters is a big part of what I do, but being able to inhabit your protagonist and know that voice and have that be the through line, especially in games like this where it is a lot of dialogue, a lot of back and forth. Whoever your protagonist is talking to, make sure that voice is you're
genuine,
very clear with what that is. And stay ahead of your audience. Set up expectations and keep them off, so they don't know what's going on.
As Steve Martin said, if the audience knows where you're going, you've already lost them.
Yeah. I think the learning for me, or the hypothesis that was confirmed, was if you want comedy to come to life in a dialogue heavy game like this, investing in full voice or even partial voice. There was a hybrid version where it's like, okay, what if only key lines were voiced? And I think that would have got us part of the way there. But I would invite game devs, like it is possible. Like you can learn to do this yourself. You don't need to hire out a studio. Like home studios and Logic or GarageBand go a long way. But hear it in the air. Make sure that like you're hearing it out loud. And if you're in a position to get great actors to do it, I think the difference between reading funny stuff and hearing it is so much more vivid.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big lesson.
Absolutely.
If you're just learning about Little Guardsmen through this talk, check it out. We'd love to hear from you. We're reachable on pretty much all the things.
How many people will you kill? You'll find out.
Go for the max number.
And yes, thank you. Thanks to the festival. Hope you check out everything, and to Hand Eye Society and Jordan for being a great facilitator. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, well.
I think we're still recording.
I think we're still on.
I had
Did you
no
do a pee
idea.
break? Watch it. Oh.
In this corner, Punch Facer. And in this corner, Tim.
And it's over! Sorry, folks, but the only rule is kill here at Blood Dome 99! Use this gun! Use more guns! Use whatever this is! Use guns to shoot the infinite ineffable mystery of our own spiral galaxy! Earn more money so you can spend more money on more upgrades, or weapons, or arenas, or Pitiful Dog. But don't spend too much. You still have to buy your freedom! Enter the Blood Dome, choose your weapon, and fight to escape the future of 1999! Available now in early access.
just dry. So Alice taking great lessons from a guy named Ted. And she's skipping out of bed camp.
Adventure instead.
So get ready for adventure and see Allie pull off
The big con.
Give me money,
Yeah.
give me my bag.
The big con.
Give me money,
Yeah.
give me my bag. Step one, Allie, test those skills. Pickpocketing is tricky, but she gotta get those bills. If Ted thinks she can handle it, I'll bring her along. He's got a job in Las Vegas.
And what could go wrong?
So get ready for adventure and see Allie pull off. Talking, sneaking, hustling her way to the end. Allie's got what it takes. Faking, disguising, joking, cross the country with Ted till he raises the stakes. Till he raises the stakes. Hop a train, cause you won't go the line. Hit the cash to save the video store. Find a payphone, check in on your mom. Hit the cash to save the video store. Hit the cash to save the video store. Get the cash, save the video store. So get ready for adventure and see Allie pull off
The big con.
Hootin' doo, hootin' doo-ah.
The big con.
Inside every creator lies a guiding star, a unique vision waiting to illuminate the world. At Stella Maris, we're not just a partner, we're your compass. With tailored mentorship, essential tools, and unwavering support, we nurture your brilliance. Discover your path, unleash your creativity, and let your star shine brightly.
Phew, what an amazing day of talks. Thanks to all the speakers, exhibitors, and everyone who tuned in to watch. I hope you got interested in more games and learned something along the way. But Super Festival is not done yet. We're here all 7 days from November 25th to December 1st, and there's still plenty more festival to go. Be sure to check out our special Super Festival website for more information about the exhibited games, our speakers, our stream schedule, our upcoming online workshops, and more. Also, if you're in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, be sure to see our map to check out the Tron arcade machines throughout the city. And join us this Saturday at the Hand-Eye Society Ball. Once again, a huge shout out to our amazing sponsors. Thank you to Ontario Creates, the City of Toronto, the Province of Ontario, the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Canada Council for the Arts, as well as our studio sponsors Clever Endeavor and Stella Maris. Well, that's all for today. We'll be back tomorrow with more talks and games. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.